It was hot in the rickety little bus, and I was on the wrong side where the July sun beat on the windows. I shifted uncomfortably inside my best suit and eased a finger inside the constricting white collar. It was a foolish outfit for this weather, but a few miles ahead, my prospective employer was waiting for me, and I had to make a good impression. There was a lot hanging on this interview. Being a newly qualified veterinary surgeon in this year of 1937 was like taking out a ticket for the dole queue. Agriculture was depressed by a decade of government neglect, and the draft horse, which had been the mainstay of the profession, was fast disappearing. There was usually 2 or 3 situations vacant in the record each week, and an average of 80 applicants for each one. It hadn't seemed true when the letter came from Derby in the Yorkshire Dales. Mr. Siegfried Farnan, MRCVS, would like to see me on the Friday afternoon. I was to come to tea, and if we were mutually suited, I could stay on as assistant. I had grabbed at the lifeline unbelievingly. The driver crashed his gears again as we went into another steep bend. We had been climbing steadily now for the last 15 miles or so, moving closer to the distant blue swell of the Pennines. I rubbed my sweating palms on my knees and tried to concentrate on the man I was going to meet. Siegfried Farnan. Strange name for a vet in the Yorkshire Dales. Probably a German who had done his training in this country and decided to set up in practice. I realized the bus was clattering along a narrow street which opened onto a square where we stopped. Above the window of an unpretentious grocer's shop, I read, Derby Cooperative Society. We had arrived. I got out and stood beside my battered suitcase, looking about me. The only visible sign of life was a group of old men sitting round the clock tower in the centre of the square, but they might have been carved from stone. Derby didn't get much space in the guidebooks, but when it was mentioned, it was described as a grey little town with 2 ancient bridges. Trengate was a quiet street leading off the square, and I had my first sight of Skeldale House. I knew it was the right place when I saw S. Farnan MRCVS on the old-fashioned brass plate hanging slightly askew on the iron railings. I liked the look of the old house. It was Georgian, with a fine white painted doorway. The windows too were white, wide and graceful on the ground floor and first story, but small and square where they peeped out from under the overhanging tiles far above. I rang the doorbell, and instantly the afternoon peace was shattered by a distant baying like a wolf pack in full cry. The upper half of the door was of glass, and as I peered through, a river of dogs poured round the corner of a long passage and dashed itself with frenzied yells against the door. If I hadn't been used to animals, I would have turned and run for my life. I saw a large woman in the passage. She rapped out a single word, and the noise stopped as if by magic. When she opened the door, the ravening pack was slinking round her feet ingratiatingly, showing the whites of their eyes and wagging their tucked-in tails. I had never seen such a servile crew. "Good afternoon," I said with my best smile. "My name is Herriot." The woman looked bigger than ever with the door open. She was about 60, but her hair, tightly pulled back from her forehead, was jet black and hardly streaked with grey. She nodded and looked at me with grim benevolence, but she seemed to be waiting for further information. Evidently the name struck no answering spark. "Mr. Farnan is expecting me. He wrote asking me to come today." "Mr. Herriot," she said thoughtfully, "surgery's from 6 to 7 o'clock. If you wanted to bring a dog in, that would be your best time." No, I said, hanging on to my smile. "I'm applying for the position of assistant. Mr. Farnan said to come in time for tea." "Assistant? Well now, that's nice." The lines in her face softened a little. "I'm Mrs. Hall. I keep house for Mr. Farnan. He's a bachelor, you know. He never said anything to me about you, but never mind, come in and have a cup of tea. He shouldn't be long afore he's back."